Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Williams. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is, at Egberto Williams. Let us engage. It is politics done right.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Williams, your host. Thank you so kindly for being with us. We are going to have a great show for you today. We have somebody special on the line for you. So we're going to get into the program as soon as possible, and then we'll cover all the other ancillary issues later thereafter. Today's show title is Polls Show Beto O'Rourke Shows How One Must Campaign as a Democrat. Subtitle, Beto O'Rourke is playing all the right cards as he intends to derail Ted Cruz. For those who are listening on Facebook Live, please do remember to share this on your page, share this on your walls, because it is important information that folks in Texas and other places will want to know. Getting started with the program. The new Quinnipiac poll is out. This is the first poll they've done in Texas. The news is not good for Ted Cruz. In fact, it shows that he is in a dead heat with Beto O'Rourke, the Democrat. Today's show will start with Peter A. Brown. He's assistant director of the Quinnipiac University Poll, has more than 30 years of experience as a political journalist and editor in Washington, D.C., New England, and Florida. Brown is the chief spokesman for the Florida, Iowa, North Carolina, Ohio, and Virginia polls, and works with Doug Schwartz to develop, analyze, and present the results of these polls. He was previously a political reporter for United Press International, served as a White House correspondent, and then political editor for Scripps Howard News Service in Washington, D.C., and also was the editor of the Insight section of the Orlando Sentinel, Brown, who covered 11 national political conventions and presidential campaigns from 1976 to 1996. He has a BS in radio, television, news, and an MS in journalism from Syracuse University. He was also a Neiman Fellow Howard. After speaking with Mr. Brown, we will discuss how Democrats must campaign to run. Secondly, we'll discuss using all media to promote the progressive narrative. But before, or without any further ado, we have Mr. Peter A. Brown. Mr. Brown, how are you doing today?
Fine. Good afternoon.
Great. Thank you so kindly for being a part of Politics Done Right today. I have a few questions that I want to come offhand with you. First of all, I understand that this is the first poll that you've done in Texas. If that is the case, why?
Quinnipiac has been doing polls now for 25 years, but almost all of them east of the Mississippi. We don't get into our schedule or why we go to particular states, but we had never done one in Texas before, and this seemed like a good idea.
It seems like a good idea to do it in Texas today. Okay, I won't ask any specifics of the of your polling methodology or why. Well, I will ask about your polling methodology, but I won't ask about specifics leading to why, when, where you do polls. Now, let me ask you. You just recently polled Texas. What races in Texas did you poll?
We polled the governor's race, the U.S. Senate race, and also we had some questions about President Trump to try to determine his popularity in the state.
And what did you find as results of Donald Trump's popularity in Texas?
Donald Trump is perhaps a little more popular in Texas than the rest of the country, but he's overall unpopular by about 10 points. Mr. Trump's approval rating does vary from state to state, but Texas is one where he does a little bit better. He gets a 43% positive approval rating. That's a little better than in some of the other states by a point or two.
And now, do you find that it seems any kind of correlation between Trump and the candidates that are running as Republicans?
hard to know. It's hard to get to people's motivation about why they vote. It's much easier to find out how someone votes or what their views are on specific questions, but why is a much more difficult question. And determining, in this case, why Mr. Trump is popular or unpopular varies generally from state to state. But obviously, he overall, nationally, he's just has not been that popular since his inauguration.
Okay, now given that we know all of that about the polls and about how his polls are doing, etc. When you correlate this, you already said that correlated with the rest of the country, he's a little bit more popular in Texas. Now, Texas has long been considered a red state, a fairly Republican state. Now, based on the polling that you've done and the questions that you've asked on your polling, can you discern if Texas is really based on the registered voters, which is, I think, is what you did, can you discern whether Texas is really a red state?
Yes, we polled registered voters.
Right. Okay. So can you then determine if Texas is absolutely a red state, or is it more nuanced than that?
It's hard to know till you get to the election and find it. The thing about polls are they tell you what questions are answered, et cetera, but you don't really know until you see the actual results on election day.
Sure, absolutely.
At this point, Texas remains what it was, a fairly reliable conservative state. The fact that Mr. O'Rourke is doing as well as he is a tribute to Mr. O'Rourke.
Okay, that is where I was going next as far as Mr. O'Rourke is doing. What did your polls show about Mr. O'Rourke? First, the top line numbers.
Well, what the polls showed that Mr. Cruz has 47%, Mr. O'Rourke has 44%. That's 3 points. That's inside the margin of error, barely.
Mm-hmm.
But for a candidate like Mr. O'Rourke, obviously this is good news.
Right.
He may not be ahead, but he's not behind, and he's staying competitive.
Now, people, a lot of pollsters look at another number, and that has to do with something called enthusiasm. Does your poll have anything to do with enthusiasm at all, or is it just absolutely how people are thinking, but not necessarily that they're going to walk out of their homes and vote?
No, it's mostly enthusiasm is a nice thing, and it makes good rallies.
Mm-hmm.
But what matters is actual voting. You only get one vote.
Right.
Each person gets one vote, and the vote of someone who's enthusiastic is worth the same amount as someone who's not enthusiastic, as long as they vote. In other words, enthusiasm is a nice thing. It helps you raise money. Obviously, Mr. O'Rourke has done very well in the money-raising department. But enthusiasm can only take you so far.
Right. Now, tell us a little bit about the internals of the polls now. What did you find?
Well, we found that for instance, Mr. Cruz wins among Republicans. Mr. O'Rourke wins among Democrats. Mr. O'Rourke has a 14-point lead among independents, and that's key. If he can keep that margin of lead over Senator Cruz, that's good news for Mr. O'Rourke. It's interesting that, again, he has a 14-point lead among independents, but he's trailing overall. For a Democrat to win in Texas, he does need to win very much among independent voters. There aren't enough Democrats to win many statewide elections. But independents can make the difference for Texas, although it's been a while since Texas has won a top-tier Republican race.
Now, I looked at your numbers a bit, and I just had time to scan some of it because, as you know, you just released it at 1 p.m. Now, there's something that I don't quite recall. What is the gap between Republicans and Democrats? What percentage of Texas in your poll shows out to be Democrats, Republicans, and independents?
36% of the electorate is independent, 31% is Republican, and 24% is Democratic.
Okay, so that is what it looks like as registered voters, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, I've always had, I've seen numbers like that before, and I know you don't go into some of these analyses, but it has always been curious to me that that there is a majority of, Republicans shown as registered Republicans. How did you come up with registered numbers? Is that just a cross-section sample that you did, or did you look at our scrolls?
No, what we did is we did what's called the random digit dial approach to polling. We have human beings making the calls, and they call random telephone numbers, not people, but telephone numbers. And that's where we get our sample from.
Now, those random numbers, there have always been, when you talk polling as well, there have always been the question as far as whether you're talking about landlines, mobile lines, or, cloud lines. What are these? Right.
We try to match the cell phone population number in a particular state with what is actually the number of people demographically.
Gotcha. That is very important because, again, to get that, as you know, BS in, BS out is the sort of thing when it comes to polling, et cetera. And I really wanted to kind of nail down exactly how you came across the registered number because as somebody on the ground, the 24-31 disparity between Democrats and Republicans, being on the ground, it seems a bit different. I know we are a you'd hear the narrative about us being a non-voting state as opposed to being a red state, and I really want to start getting some hard numbers on that. And I think you've probably started that with correlating the cell phone population with the actual, and then randomizing it and bringing it into the registered domain. So I think that is very important. Now I don't know if you can answer this or not, but I'm going to try anyway. This is the first poll that you've done on the race in Texas. The first question is going to be,
correct,
will you guys be doing more polls in Texas going forward, number one? Can you answer that or not?
Yeah, we don't talk about our schedule. Next.
Okay. I got you. Okay. And well, the next question then is, by the way, how many states do you poll right now? Or is that a number as well?
No, we poll in probably roughly a dozen states, although not all at the same time.
Okay, great.
Some years there are states we do, but we don't do them all every year. There's some states, for instance, Virginia, which elects a governor in the year after a presidential election. We poll during that year, but often don't poll them again very often for the rest of the 4-year cycle. It depends, essentially.
Great. Now, how did your poll do in the last election?
Well, first the question is, what's the last election?
The last election meaning the presidential race, 2016. Let's say President Trump versus Clinton. Were you within the margin of errors?
We were within the margin of error in Florida. But we did have Secretary Clinton ahead by like a point or so.
Yeah, but that's
she won by a point or so, and it was within the margin of error. Ohio, I think we had it at 5. It turned out to be 7. Margin. That's certainly within the margin of error. I'm trying to think what other states.
Well, that's good. I just kind of wanted to sort of a little feel about that, but
right.
Even with the breakdown that you came up with as far as registered voters in Texas, the Democratic versus Republican model, I think it speaks extremely well for Beto O'Rourke. Now, quickly, tell me a little bit about your about the Republican race for governor. What did you find?
We found that in the governor's race, Governor Abbott is ahead of both potential Democratic candidates by 9 points over Ms. Valdez and by 7 over Andrew White. Probably the most important number in the entire poll about the governor's race is 54. 54 is the percentage of Texans who think that Mr. Abbott is doing a good job as governor.
Oh, wow.
Candidates with governors who have 54% job approval ratings don't lose very often.
Okay. Okay, well, I guess progressives have a lot of work to do here in Texas. But anyway, Mr. Brown, it was, first of all, thank you so kindly for spending these 15 minutes with us. We really needed to hear some of the numbers that you came up with, and I hope to have you back when you have, if and when you have a new poll out with these different important races in Texas. Thank you so kindly.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
You too now. Okay, folks, as you can see, Beto O'Rourke is doing a whole lot better, in my opinion at least. I think Beto O'Rourke is doing a whole lot better than I expected him to be at this point in the race. I mean, it's a dead heat within 3 points, or with, I guess, 44-47 within 3 points. And here's the kicker. What the pollster had to say about the way they figure what registered voters look like in Texas. I don't know how many activists are listening or watching right here on the system here, and had to adjust that camera a little bit on the system right here. But as it turns out, that 24-31 split between Democrats and Republicans, I think it's a very, very hard number to come by. I don't believe, given the demographics of the state, that is the case. In fact, in the blog of the week that I have, which I won't read, I don't think. You know what? We probably do the blog of the week anyhow. But beforehand, I don't buy the 24-31. I understand how he got to it, and that's one of the reasons that I wanted him to tell us how he got to that number. But given the demographics of Texas, that is fairly unlikely. So without further ado, what I'm going to do here is let's go ahead and have the blog of the week, which kind of goes over some of those things.
It's time for the weekly blog post.
Okay, here it goes. Title: Beto O'Rourke, Democrat of Texas, in virtual tie with Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas, for Texas Senator. I just received the Quinnipiac Poll from, and it was a shocker. I got an email from the release department of Quinnipiac that said, okay, the poll is going to be out at 1 p.m. And I said, should I wait on the poll for 1 p.m. or not? And I said, you know what, I'll wait for the poll to see what it has to say, because it just might have some interesting information in it. And guess what? It did. Just received the Quinnipiac Poll. What Beto O'Rourke is doing throughout Texas is working, people. It is working. He has 7 more months to close the deal. It is clear he likely will. And if you doubt that he likely will, just again take a look at the numbers for, let's say, Valdez, or the number for White versus the incumbent governor. What I think Beto has been successful in doing, Beto has been successful in making himself touchable, reachable, accessible, and all those ubbles, if you know what I mean. According to Quinnipiac, the closely watched U.S. Senate race in Texas is too close to call, with 47% for Republican incumbent Senator Ted Cruz and 44% for U.S. Senator or U.S. Representative Beto O'Rourke, his Democratic challenger, according to a Quinnipiac University poll released today. There are wide party, gender, age, and racial gaps. The independent Quinnipiac, KWIN is how it's spelled, Quinnipiac Poll, University Poll, finds the following. And folks, if you're just chiming in, please do remember to share this program on Facebook. And if you're not just chiming in, please, again, remember to share Twitter, tweet it, everything. And I'll be don't forget, call 646-716-5812 if you want to discuss this on air. And, of course, I'll be reading what you have in the comment section of the comment section of our program here, of the video on Facebook. Anyhow, the closely watched the poll released today. There are wide party, gender, age, and racial gaps. Here it goes. O'Rourke gets 87% versus 9% support from Democrats. Think about that. 87 versus 9% support from Democrats, and 51 versus 37% backing from independent voters. Republicans go to Cruz, 88-6. So what that means is Cruz is getting about the same support from the Republicans as O'Rourke is getting from Democrats. But as the pollster who we just spoke to made clear, even though Beto O'Rourke has a 14-point lead among independents, he still, according to this poll, trails by 3 points. So of course, the poll has a plus or minus 4 or so error rate, which means that it's still a virtual tie. But the fact that he's still down just shows that, well, they had a larger percentage of Republicans that they polled, such that the same percentage has more weight. Secondly, men back Cruz by 40%. 51% of men back Cruz, 40% back O'Rourke. While women go 47% for O'Rourke, 43% for Cruz. Women, please help me here. Cruz is trying to take away a whole lot of your rights. How can so many women support Ted Cruz? I don't get it. Maybe somebody can call and explain it to me. 646-716-5812. 646-716-5812. Okay, voters from the age of 18 to 34 support the Democrat 50% to 34%. Even that number seems a little bit concerning, that there are 34% of the voters who would support a person like Ted Cruz. While voters over 65 go for the Republican 50 to 43%. That to me was surprising. I expected Republicans to garner a larger number of the older folk. What this tells me is that O'Rourke and progressives, they have some inroads here. And not only do they have some inroads, and I'm talking about the older folk, if they can get those numbers up, those are very reliable voters, and they'll go out there and vote. So, I mean, I think there's a lot to do right now by progressives to really point out the disaster that the Republican policies are for Social Security, the Republican policies are for Medicare, Medicaid, etc. We have to hit those numbers to make these people understand specifically that a Republican administration in its current form is a clear and present danger to their personal economies. Okay, voters, let's see. White voters back Cruz 59 to 34%. O'Rourke leads 78 to 18% among black voters and 51 to 33% among Hispanic voters. I find it disconcerting that someone with such a poor record with people of color continues to do as well as he is in the polls with them. I cannot understand how any Republican under these current conditions can get 18% of the black vote and 33% of the Hispanic vote when that party has shown a disregard and a level of violence, mental violence and implicit violence against those folks with their policies. It is hard to imagine, and folks are going to say, what do you mean by that? Well, if these communities are disproportionately less advantaged, financially or whatever, that means anything that they do will affect these particular communities more. And when it comes to the criminal justice system, of course, when it comes to not supporting policies that force police departments and the like to move forward, that's a clear and present danger. When it comes to urban schools not getting the kind of monies that they need to get through these different policies, that affects predominantly people of color. And we can go on and on and on. I cannot understand in how any of these folk will support a Ted Cruz who materially affects them. And for the middle class white people as well, I cannot understand how he's negatively affecting your personal economies, and somehow because of party, you continue to vote for him. Hopefully, if you're listening to Politics Done Right, as we go over objectively policies of these different people, somehow, just maybe, we will be able to make a difference into convincing you not to change your party affiliation, but to vote your interest, So again, as I said, I find it disconcerting that some people of such poor record with people of color continues to do as well as they are in the polls. That gives Beto O'Rourke's team, not Beto O'Rourke himself, the opportunity to better his numbers by educating people on Cruz's real value. Notice what I said. I don't think it is Beto O'Rourke's place to go out there and say, oh, you know what they're doing, because he's supposed to be above the fray. What they're doing is disproportionately affecting people of color. He doesn't need to go out there and say that. The activists that work with him are supposed to know that that is what's in his head. But the activists out there are supposed to be going into these communities and letting them know that it is a clear and present danger to vote for a Ted Cruz. It's a clear and present danger to vote in the 2018 election. And this isn't an anti-Republican statement. This is the anti-Republican policy statement for our current being, or the current state that we're in. Nobody who cares about their personal economy, who cares about their well-being, should be voting Republican in 2018. Next year, whenever the Republican Party decide to get humane, then it's a free-for-all. You pick the candidate that best suits you. However, in the current state of America, where they're cutting teacher pay, where they're cutting services, where they're cutting all these issues, you are voting against your own interest if you vote Republican. I can't say it any simpler than that. That is a truth, and I think we can go over those truths quite often. All right, the Quinnipiac poll continued. Senator Cruz gets lackluster grades, including a 47% to 5% job approval rating and a 46% to 44% favorability rating. In other words, he's 2% favorable. In Texas, madre mía, ¿cómo va a ser eso? How can it possibly be that this guy has a favorability of 46%, even if it's 2 points? I mean, he's still under 50, but my God. O'Rourke gets a 30 to 16% favorability rate. In other words, he has a 14-point spread. 14-point spread. Much better. But then, 53% of Texan voters don't even know enough about him to really have an opinion. And they don't know enough about him because he was a congressman. He didn't have the visibility that Ted Cruz has. But the good thing about it is, as people are becoming more visible about Beto O'Rourke, the good thing that's happening is that he is out there meeting people. He's out there talking to people. He's out there fleshing people, touching people, hugging people, answering questions. And if I had remembered, I would have played the video interview that I did with Beto O'Rourke a couple of months ago. I think it's about 2 months ago. He came out here to Greenspoint, and I got him aside and pulled him aside for an interview. But you can go to BetoWillies.com. Just do a search on Beto O'Rourke, and you can definitely find the interview that I did with Beto O'Rourke. Pretty good interview, and he gave it some good speeches out here. Democrats have, or rather, Texas voters like Ted Cruz as a person, 47 to 38%. Again, that is shocking. Do people really like obnoxious, precocious type folk? Or is this just a party thing? I don't know. Anyway, voters like Beto O'Rourke as a person, 40 to 13%, with a 47% undecided. Yeah, well, there's a lot of people that don't. The reason I'm saying that, I don't like to be very negative, but it's hard not to be negative when we're talking about Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is a guy whose origins are Cuban, who was born in Canada. And he's one of the most anti-immigrant people in Congress. How can you benefit? How can you benefit from all this country has to offer you, having not been born here, and at the same time be so harsh with folks like immigrants? Anyhow, folks, if you're just tuning in, please, the first thing that I'd like to ask you to do is please go ahead and share these programs on your wall. Please go ahead and share it so that we can make sure it gets picked up. All right. Democrats have had a target on Senator Ted Cruz's back, and they may be hitting the mark. Once expected to cruise to re-election, get the pun? Cruise to re-election. The incumbent is in a tight race with Democratic U.S. Senator Representative Beto O'Rourke, said Peter A. Brown, assistant director of the Quinnipiac Poll. The key may well be independent voters. O'Rourke's 51 to 37% lead among the group is key to his standing today. But Texas remains a strong GOP state, so O'Rourke will need the independent strength to pull the upset. In other words, independents will really have to come out and vote. My contention is Democrats have to come out and vote, because I don't buy that only 24% of Texas are Democrats. I do not buy that. At 25% each, immigration and healthcare are the most important issues in their U.S. Senate vote, with 22% for the economy and 16% for gun policy. You know what that tells me? 25% for immigration, 25% for healthcare. What we need to do is bang on healthcare. We need to bang on the economy. And then we have to bang on immigration, but in a particular manner. We have to learn to talk about immigration as an economic issue, perfectly so, because they're going to make it an economic issue as far as taking jobs from natives. We are going to make it an economic issue of how it creates jobs and quite a bit more. Okay, folks, the telephone number is 646-716-5812, 646-716-5812. Let's go to the page and see if we have anything to talk about. I think we should have something to talk about. After all, these are polls that are hot off the press. They just released these polls at 1 p.m. I got an email directly from Quinnipiac saying actually I got the email yesterday saying the Quinnipiac poll would be out at 1 p.m. And let's see what we have here. Bear with me 1 second, folks. Let's see what we have here. But I think altogether for O'Rourke, this is great news. Okay, let's start reading. Let's see. Welcome. First of all, let me welcome all you folks on Facebook Live. Bruce Pilar, Diane Raymond, Shane Brooks, Chase K. Escamilla, Rolando Nieves. Let's see. Marianne Richards Castiglia. Welcome aboard. And, of course, my resident conservative, Miguel Cesac. Mike Cesic. Okay. Diane Raymond says, anyone who doesn't know who O'Rourke is has no excuse. We all need to know who is running. It's not like they're hiding. For years, the Texas GOP has made sure that Democrats feel impotent, that it's not even worth going out and voting. Hence, Texas has earned the reputation as the lowest voter turnout in USA. People not knowing O'Rourke or any candidate is a non-excuse. You can bet they know who the righty is. And you know what? You're absolutely right about that, Diane Raymond. You're absolutely right. Shane Brooks says, irresponsible and ignorant teachers from the pulpits, blind guides from the church. That's why many minorities vote against their own best interests. The perversion of religion is surely responsible for a good measure of this. Tough to swallow. I understand what you're trying to say, Shane. In other words, a lot of these voters, you're thinking maybe looking at social issues, things like abortion, things like, and these other issues that affect them. You know, that is a distinct possibility. Shane Brooks also says, and mind you, most definitely the main reason white folk like myself were and are being manipulated. The evangelical support says all. You know, that is very true. In other words, what Shane is saying is, everybody is getting manipulated. For those of you who read my blogs and read my stuff about the plutocracy and the Powell Manifesto, you understand exactly how it is done to put things in our heads, to put things in our minds, to convince us to convince us, in effect, as Shane says, to vote against our own interests. Okay, Case Escamilla, have a great show today. Thank you very much, Chase. Where are the drums? The drums? I don't know. Maybe I need to get... I tell you what, lo que voy a hacer es conseguirme un poco de bongos y timbales. I'll get me some bongos and some timbales, okay? And then we can go ahead and have a little salsa jamming out here. Rolando Nieves says, get him. We will follow up in midterms elections. Okay? We're going to win this, baby. I actually think we are. Shane Brooks come back and say, bye, Felicia. Time for a true blue working class man with hard hat and represent Texas. Great. Hello, Marian Castiglia, and hi, y'all, from Bruce. And let's see what else Mike Sisek has to say. Mike says, come on. He says, O'Rourke's problem is that he has a huge unknown factor. That is very true, Mike. Most people just don't know him. Once they do, they will switch. Now, he believes they will switch away from him once they know who he is. In other words, they're going to switch away from O'Rourke once they know who O'Rourke is. Let me tell you, for somebody who met O'Rourke, who was not initially impressed with O'Rourke because of some specific issues when he came out, and he was trying to play the role, in my opinion, of being sort of a Republican light. And, you know, Republican lights don't win, really. If people want Republican, they'll vote Republican. If people must have a Republican, they'll vote for a Republican. So no, actually, as people meet him, talk to him, feel him, touch him, ask him questions, they tend to like him a whole lot more. And I've seen that from Republicans who've gone to his town halls, because the town hall that I taped, several of the people who attended his town hall, they were actually Republicans. Let's see what else I have here. Welcome aboard, Cliff Maxwell, Gino Winters. I think we got some Panamanians in the house. Okay, let's see. Bruce, I'm not finding any Texas state tax changes. Only proposed to cap property tax increases, but that hasn't gone anywhere yet. And let me tell you something about that property tax, Bruce. Our state... The government in our state has done some very evil things, and one of the things they've done is, in order to be able to go ahead and sell and say, "Oh, we cut taxes. We are such great Congress people. We've cut your taxes in Austin." The part that they don't tell you in the process of doing that, they assume that your locale, your district, your school district will increase taxes to compensate for what they've cut. So they didn't cut taxes. They just changed who actually taxed you. These are the things that we have to know. Folks, if you're just coming on to the show, please go ahead and share it on your Facebook page. And please remember to share it as wide as you can, because, as you know, we cover important issues. Okay, I'm not sure. Let's see. I see another message on Bruce here. Says, thanks. I was not sure this made a difference to the loss of yearly increases. Yeah, well, you know, the thing about it is they expect the districts to make up the difference. The problem is the districts are not, by law, they don't really have to do a damn thing. They just have to pay the bills. Okay, however, that is supposed to be done. Okay, Mike says, Mike says, I'm not finding any tax changes. Okay, that was Mike. Let's see what else is here, if I missed anybody's comments. All right, then there's something that I want to talk about. And this, I was watching MSNBC today. And this is important, folks. And this goes for every activist. Every activist that comes in contact with a politician, I want you to remind that politician of something. Because today, sitting down, watching MSNBC, and first of all, recently I haven't seen a lot of one-on-one interviews between a host and a Democrat. Any Democrat. I haven't seen that. I could be wrong, but I haven't seen that. But what I saw today was very disconcerting, because Senator Menendez was interviewed on MSNBC. I don't remember the name of the interviewer. And they were interested in talking about Russia. they were interested in talking about this kind of flap between Nikki Haley and that economist that's now working for Trump. And they spent the entire 6, 7, 8 minutes or however many minutes talking about the Russia issue, talking about the snub issue, about whether the penalties that they were going to put on Russia or sanctions that they were going to put on Russia was going to be real or not. That's what they spent their time talking about. Not once did Menendez says, okay, I've discussed Russia, I've discussed Nikki Haley, we have some time here. Let me tell you what's the Democratic plan for 2018. Let me tell you why I am supporting these different Democrats in 2018, these different progressives in 2018. This is what we are going to do. The Republicans so far have cut health care to such a manner that an extra several million people are going to be left off of health care. We are going to make sure that those people are restored. Those people that were cut from health care, when we take control of Congress, we will restore that, and the president will sign that. And when it comes to taxes, we will repeal the taxes if anyone makes any attempt to cut Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. That's what we're going to do if we get elected. However, if our opponents get elected, their intent is to cut the social safety net to cover the tax cut scam that was used to give away money. And by the way, MSNBC host, did you see what happened yesterday on CNBC? Did you notice what happened on Wall Street? Did you notice exactly what we said about the tax plan is occurring? Did you notice that Goldman Sachs profit went up by 27% and that they made over $2.5 billion after they paid all their expenses? And did you realize that all that money went not to improve the employees' wages, but it went all to the shareholders and the executives? Did you realize that, Mr. MSNBC host? That is why the Democrats need to win, so that all the spoils don't go to a few. I didn't hear anybody trying to bring up the progressive narrative. You know, Mr. MSNBC host, the children going or children and the young adults going to college right now, they are facing some very hard times. And especially since the Federal Reserve, in as much as we don't have high inflation, has decided to start raising interest rates. Do you know that a lot of these kids' interest rates are going up? Do you know that we as a society, there's some legislation out there to ensure that student loans are at the same rate that banks borrow from the government, which would make it quite affordable for quite a few more? That is what we're going to do. There is so much. There is absolutely so much for progressives to talk about whenever they get the chance to do it. I don't care if they're asking you about Russia. I don't care if they're asking you about Nikki Haley. I don't care if they're asking you about Pompeo. You get your face on TV, you answer the question in a very short manner, and you change the narrative. You change the narrative so that you can use that platform to tell your people, to tell Americans what voting for a progressive is going to do for them in November, and you give them the reason to go out there and vote. Nothing Senor Menendez spoke about had anything to do with anybody's personal economy. They spoke Russia, they spoke Nikki Haley. How does that improve anybody's personal economy? How does that make life better for anybody? As Democrats, it is imperative that we learn how to use the narrative, and we learn where to use the narrative. The people who know how to do that well are Republicans. Notice during the election, their narrative, no matter what question was asked, they were eventually able to turn it right back onto something against Hillary. And they kept a consistent message and were able to do that. And they got people to listen, because you hear a Republican being interviewed, you know exactly what's going to happen. It is imperative that we know how to talk about the narrative, the progressive narrative. What are we going to do for you? Why are we better for you? Not to impeach Trump when we get if progressives get to win Congress. That's not the biggest thing, because you impeach Trump and you put Pence in. How does that change any individual American's personal economy? How does that make life better for the student? The question every Democrat, every progressive should be asking: everything that I'm saying out loud on TV, everything that I'm saying out loud on the radio, should always promote, how am I going to make your life better? Right now, the news media is out there saying how great the economy is. Look, if there are two of us in the room, and I make $9,000 and you make $1,000, the average salary in that room is $5,000. Okay? I tell you what, I want to make it even more dramatic than that. If I make $100 and you make $9,900, the average salary in that room is $5,000. So when you're putting the headlines out, oh my God, the economy is doing great. The GDP is up and the growth rate is at 3.3%. Excellent. But how much of that went to the average American citizen? Very, very little. And these are the narratives we constantly have to pump into people's head. How better is your economy today than it was yesterday? How better is your personal economy today than it was 2 years ago? What did you hear, or what has anyone told you that will improve your economy? I'm going to tell you how we're going to do it. And these are the specific things we're going to do. Those that are burdened with those student loans, we're going to fix it. Those that are burdened by healthcare costs, we're working towards single-payer Medicare for all. Those that are burdened by banking charges, we are going to regulate those banks so that they can no longer rip you off and charge you 30% interest or 929% interest, supposedly because your credit score is under 600 points. Folks, when I saw Menendez today, given his great answers about Nikki Haley, his great answers about Russia, the only question I had was, what is that going to do for the average American citizen? And that is what we must always ask ourselves. And so activists that are listening, and even those that are not activists but know their politician, call your politician and tell them, stop talking. Look, make Russia one sentence. Make Nikki Haley one sentence. And then continuously talk about what you are going to do for every single American. What are you going to do for every single American? That is what will win you the race. Americans need to know that they have a reason to vote for you. Otherwise, they stay with the status quo. I want to read you. I want to read you a piece of something that I think I wrote this. Actually, this was a blog that I wrote today that I think I was going to talk about. But since we had already talked about Wall Street, I figure let's hold back on that. But I think it is pertinent now, because the fact of the matter, folks, is Americans are getting royally screwed. But the thing about it is, the narrative is so good on the other side. The narrative is so very well put together on the Republican side that even though a lot of people know that tax cut is not really for them, or a lot of things aren't going very well, they really have the belief that things are going, it's okay. So today's blog that I had was earnings way up, Wall Street pocketing billions from the Trump tax cuts. And I love what they said at Common Dreams, and I want to read you what they said at Common Dreams, okay? At Common Dreams, he said, without the tax savings resulting from the new lower corporate tax rate, Wells Fargo's earnings would have declined from a year ago instead of increasing, and much of the year-over-year growth at Citigroup and Bank of America would be gone, the journal noted. Losing the tax bump would have cut the earnings growth of J.P. Morgan to 28% from 35%. For Goldman, growth would have shrunk by at least a quarter. Joining the profit bonanza on Wednesday was Morgan Stanley, which posted record quarterly earnings and 40% profit jump thanks in large part to lower taxes. The Wall Street earnings report rolled in just as President Trump was using the occasion of tax day to proclaim that ordinary Americans are winning thanks to the plan he designed into law last December. But the numbers, here's a kicker, but the numbers show that that any benefits American workers may be seeing from the $1.5 trillion in tax cuts are far outweighed by the soaring paychecks of investors and corporate fat cats. Tax cut riches have gone to execs and investors over workers by nearly 3-to-1 margin, CNBC found in an analyst published on Tuesday. Let me stop there for a second because that also only partially true. They say it went 3-to-1. That's not completely true. When you create a deficit like this, you also have to sell bonds, right? You actually have to sell bonds to pay for the bills that you're no longer paying for in taxes. And the people who buy those bonds are the wealthy people in general. And the wealthy people are going to get another check, right? They first get a tax cut, and then you are going to pay them to loan them the money for the tax cut that you gave them. Come on, folks. This is simple math here. We ought to really start figuring out a lot of this stuff and learn how we must vote in order to protect our own economy. I mean, somebody's going to pay this stuff based on the way our economic system works right now. Anyway, tax cut riches have gone to execs and investors over workers by nearly 3-to-1 margin. Anyway, continuing. Chad Bolt, Associate Policy Director at Indivisible, noted that Wall Street's soaring profits alongside meager worker gains should hardly be surpassed, given that Trump tax plan was always, again, here's what he says. The Trump GOP tax plan was always a scam on the American people. Yes, the tax cut scam was always that, a scam on the American people. And that is what we're left with. Folks, the telephone number is 646-716-5812. We still have about 6 minutes or so that we can take calls. Again, that number is 646-716-5812. And what I'm going to do right now is to go ahead and check to see if we have any more, wrong one. Check to see if we have any more messages on the board that I can go ahead and read out to the people listening on Blog Talk Radio and people watching on Facebook Live. Let's see. Let's go ahead and see what we have here. Okay, Mike Cisak. Egberto cheered on Chavez socialist policies until the Venezuela economy completely crashed. They have and still are putting in policies along with nationalizing industries that are promoting here. Why would anyone want to be home in Venezuela? Okay. I am glad you said that. Venezuela. Remember, yo soy Latino. I'm from Latin America. I understand all the things that occur in that part of the world. Let me tell you about Venezuela. And a lot of Venezuelans give me a hard time because they think I'm misled. But I think what happens a lot of time is that they just don't know. Venezuela is a rich country. It is swimming in oil. Not the best oil, a lot of sulfur in their oil, but it's swimming in oil. That country shouldn't be poor. But for too long, their own plutocracy robbed them dry, complicit with foreign oil companies. That's the truth. These guys have always been a rich country. Now, Hugo Chavez was a result of a country where the plutocracy pilfered its people. In other words, the people were living in poverty even though the country had ample natural resources for good living. When Chavez came along, Chavez created a socialist republic, true? And in so doing, he took the vast majority of the poor out of abject poverty. That's, again, all these things are quantifiable. You don't have to listen to my word on this. These are all quantifiables. Now, what happens when a plutocracy is challenged? When a plutocracy is challenged, the simple thing that occurs is immediate. They start to reduce the production within the country. And that is exactly what happened. So things started to become scarce because who runs the factories? The plutocracy. Who runs the farms? The plutocracy. All these things, they started to say what we're going to do then is starve the nation. How we starve the nation, because given that we had this punk come along to govern us now, we are going to show him. And we are going to make sure that everything is scarce. And you start to make things scarce, you then apply blame to the government for making things scarce. You know, I fault Hugo Chavez and a lot of these guys for a whole lot of things, right? I think, first of all, I am for free enterprise and I'm for independent companies, all that good stuff. I'm not a communist at all. I am a free enterprise democratic person, period. Democracy rules, free enterprise rules. I think the form of capitalism that we run today, there's nothing democratic about it. I mean, if you have any example, one of the products that I attempted to create was called One Click. Well, it's now called One Click by Amazon, who got the patent for it, which prohibited me, my free enterprise, to create that product, which I had already created. It's just that they patented it before I did. And you know what? I said I created it. The fact of the matter is, it's such a simple concept that thousands of programmers, thousands of website developers created it because it was just a one-click type of shopping. But the patent system said it belonged to Amazon. It reduced my potential for a product. That's not freedom. And I can go over and over. Monsanto, or these folks, the farmer whose land got pollinated by the neighboring farmer, who then made his crop genetically different, genetically a chemical company's crop, was then sued and lost. He didn't do anything. The pollen came over to his place, and he keeps his seed every year. Why shouldn't he be able to keep the seed that was pollinated by the other farmer who bought that seed from the chemical company? Look, my book called, As I See It, Class Warfare, The Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom, talks a whole lot about these issues. As far as, capitalism as we practice it, there's nothing democratic about it. I mean, they'll preach it, but there's nothing democratic about it. You can do very little. As an employee, what are your rights? In a real democracy, employees would have rights. Without a union, you can be fired. There is, the fallacy that somehow our economic system as practiced in the United States make us so much of a democracy is false. China is a capitalist country. China ain't no democracy. So what I'm trying to tell you folks is, don't buy into the hype. Don't buy into the hype of what's going on with Hugo Chavez or the new, I can't remember his name now, the new president. Now, he's not as talented as Hugo Chavez. Well, he's not talented at all. But again, there is a reason why Hugo Chavez got created, and he was created because of a failing plutocracy who kept its citizens in abject poverty. Hugo Chavez actually started to mitigate that, of course, because it meant that the plutocracy could not continue to pilfer. They just didn't like it, and they made sure the country failed. And my only hurt is in the failing country. Maduro, thank you very much, Mr. Gibson. Maduro, Nicolas Maduro. And the only reason the country failed is because the plutocracy who controlled the means of production made it so. But the people don't know that. The people just look at the government as something to blame. Folks, we're coming to the end of the show. This is the time that I do my little pitch that I ask. I ask that if you like the program, I ask that if you want to continue getting progressive programs out there in the air, enlightening people with information not heard on mainstream media, information not corrupted by the corporations who force the mainstream media to take certain stances. If you really want that, if you want to have progressive media out there that is not towing the line, that is really telling people truths and making sure that they know how to vote appropriately, please go to patreon.com/politicsdoneright and become a subscriber of Politics Done Right. Again, that is patreon.com/politicsdoneright. Become a subscriber of Politics Done Right. It is a very expensive venture to do what we're doing here. It's not as simple as it seems. And this is just being in the office. This doesn't talk about going here and there to do what we need to do to get progressives elected, not only in 2018, but going forward. This is a 10-year project. This is going to be a 10-year project. So please go to patreon.com/politicsdoneright. We need hundreds of patrons, and right now we're very much behind. So please consider becoming a member of, or rather, a contributor to Politics Done Right, a subscriber to Politics Done Right. And I just want to tell you, I don't only talk it. I am a subscriber to the Daily Coast, Op-Ed News, a whole lot. KPFT, of course, which I do a program there as well. Democratic Underground, and many others. I think as progressives, if we really want to get these words out, we have to make sure all these rags stay alive. So again, please go to patreon.com/politicsdoneright, patreon.com/politicsdoneright. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right, and I am out. You have a wonderful rest of the day.
Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.
1, 2, 3, 4.